Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. Thanks for sharing your busy day with us. My name's Karen Burness. I'm the Marketing Manager here at LiveHire, and today I'll be the webinar moderator. The topic for today's session is onboarding excellence, and we have the amazing David Burkus with us to present. I'll introduce him to you shortly. Let's just kick off with our acknowledgement of country, and then we'll do some housekeeping. We would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today around Australia and the elders past and present. We acknowledge the ongoing connection that Aboriginal people have to this land and recognise Aboriginal people as the original custodians of this land. As I mentioned, we're fortunate to have the amazing David Burkus with us today to present on the topic of onboarding. Hi, David.
Hey, I'm excited to be here. Excited to be a part of this.
Thank you. And of course, we have our own amazing Liron Rudovitz from LiveHire with us also today. Hey, Liron.
Hey, Karen. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining.
And of course, you've already met me. My name's Karen and I'm the moderator. So we've got plenty of time for you to ask David questions at the end. When you're asking us questions, if you could submit those through this section at the bottom where it says Q&A, everyone's screen should look a little bit like this, and hopefully you have that Q&A button. That would be the best place for you to submit your questions. If I can answer them, I'll answer them straight away. And of course, if they're for David, we'll leave those till the end and I'll moderate those. Everyone will be receiving a copy of the recording from today's session within a couple of hours of the session completing, so keep an eye out for that. As always, you'll receive the post-event survey when you exit today. We'd love your feedback. If you have any suggestions on speakers or topics that you'd like to hear more about, please tell us, because these webinars are for you and we want you to get the most out of them. Our next event is our very good friend Barbara Bruno, who's going to be talking to us about intake meetings with hiring managers and how you can improve those. That will be on the 30th of November, so keep an eye out for that invitation. Now, as you've probably seen in the invitations, David's latest book is called Best Team Ever, and we have a heap of those to give away today. And I can hear you all saying, how can I win one? Well, all you need to do is answer this question. What about your onboarding process causes pain in your organisation? And the best answers I'll be reading out a bit later with Liron, and also they will receive a link via the question and answer box that will just ask for your postage address, and then we'll get those shipped to you via Amazon today. So good luck with that. Tell me all about what about your onboarding process causes pain in your organisation to get your hands on one of David's books. Our agenda for today looks a little bit like this. We're almost done with our housekeeping. I'm going to pass over to David shortly to present to you on onboarding excellence. He's then going to pass on to Liron, who's going to talk to you about how you can streamline onboarding with LiveHire. And then, as I mentioned, we've got that amazing amount of time at the end, 15 minutes, to do live Q&A with David. So I'm going to stop sharing and introduce you to David. Dr. David Burkus is an organisational psychologist and author, as well as a former business school professor. Today, he is one of the world's leading business thinkers. His forward-thinking ideas and insights are regularly featured in the Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, USA Today, Fast Company, BBC, CNN, etc., etc. He's the best-selling author of 5 books about business and leadership. Since 2017, David has been ranked multiple times as one of the world's top business thought leaders. We're excited to have him speaking to you today. I was very excited when he agreed to join us. So please join me in welcoming Dr. David Burkus. Thanks, David.
Oh no, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Truthfully, because I think about my own experiences with onboarding and the pain, right? I absolutely loved your pain question. And it's funny, I'm already seeing a ton of these answers coming in, and a lot of them are around tech, which is no surprise there, tech and documentation or what have you. But let me tell you the most painful onboarding experience I ever had, and then we'll set up how to really make sure it runs smoothly, our guiding principle, and I'll give you some ways to do that. The most painful onboarding experience I have ever had was actually my very first job out of university. I took some time in between graduating as an undergrad with a bachelor's and going on to graduate school, getting a doctorate, becoming a business school professor, what have you. And I worked in what we would now call a remote job, which at the time we would have just called field sales. And I'll never forget it. I did all of the interviews. I had only actually met 2 people that worked for the company in that entire process. I met who would be my manager, and I met his boss. And those were the only 2 people I had met. I had to fly to meet one of them. I got the job offer. I was told, did all the contracting. I was told my start date, and I woke up on my start date and I had no idea what I was supposed to do. I knew it was my start date, but I had no other instructions. So not knowing what else to do, I did the one thing I could think of doing. I called my boss, and I struggled to hear him a bit because he was in the middle of a conference. Apparently, my start date was also the start date of the annual company-wide meeting that he was at, that I wasn't at, because apparently I was not onboarded fast enough, that I wasn't at, but he was. And so he didn't really have the time to tell me what my assignments for the day was. All he did was he forwarded me an email with a FedEx tracking number and said, I think your laptop is supposed to come at some point today. And so you could go ahead and get that set up. And then I didn't hear from him again until the following Monday, because the week-long event was over. Not exactly the greatest onboarding process. Now, he turned out to be a great boss. I ended up working with underneath him for like 6 years. I really enjoyed my team, what have you, but I'll never forget just how weird of a first day experience that was. It didn't get any better from there, by the way. So he was great, but then also there was all sorts of documentation and processing and stuff to do. And then they sent me off to a primary training where I lived out of a hotel for 3 weeks. Right. And I went through all of these different training classes and what have you with people who would not be the people I was working with, just the other people who were hired that month. We all went through the training class together. And I'll never forget, I got back and I met my first coworker, not my manager, but the first person that worked for him, my first coworker. And his job was to take me around that day. And I got in the car and he said, well, now you're done with training. I'll show you how things actually happen in this company. Okay, so if you're keeping track, I've been working here for almost a month now. I've met very few people on my actual team. I've gone to a really expensive training program, and then I've come back and I've been told by the first coworker, the first colleague that I've met, that everything in that training was useless and that he was going to show me how things were really going to happen. Not exactly the best recipe for a smooth onboarding process, right? And I think it's interesting. I see this in a lot of the comments that we're looking at, right? A lot of these comments, people's most painful experiences, have a lot to do about the technology, the tools, the documents that need to get back, the compliance trainings that need to happen. But the truth is, I share with you my experience, because when we look at the data on what employees' experience is in the onboarding process, what we find, and a lot of this comes from Keith Rolag at Babson College, who's done an amazing job studying all this. When we look at that data, what we find is that the people who have the highest rates of retention, the highest rates of engagement, the highest rates of performance, they come out of an onboarding process that prioritizes connection over documentation. Connection over documentation. And this doesn't mean, by the way, that documentation is not important, that getting the right things done isn't important. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I'm saying is to make sure that we have a smooth onboarding process that really makes people feel like they belong, that they know what's expected of them, and they get engaged. It's important that connection to their peers, connection to their employees, to the people that we're working with, that is the priority in an onboarding process in the first few days, weeks, and months. And so what I would love, my philosophy is, in essence, kind of aligned with LiveHires, right? My philosophy is hiring managers, those new leaders, their job is connection. And as much as we can smooth all of the documentation, all of the processing, all of the technological stuff, as much as we can smooth that out, we should, so that we have a lot more time for that connection. So today, what I want to talk about with you is I want to go over kind of 4 or 5 really key ideas on how to prioritize connection over documentation moving forward as an organization, and give you some practical ways you can put those principles into practice, right? So my first one, truthfully, is that if you're going to prioritize connection over documentation, you have to start before they start. You have to start getting to know and getting connected to those new people before their actual start date. You don't want to You don't want to put people in a situation like me, where you wake up and it's your start date and you're getting ready for work and you realize I have no idea what to do. All I have is the cell phone number of the hiring manager who made me the job offer, and I don't even have a computer to email him with. So I'm going to have to call him on his cell phone. You're going to need to start before they start. You start before they start, not only planning for the onboarding, but reaching out to them. I mean, my favorite tip to do, if you're that hiring manager, if you're responsible for making sure that person is welcome, is to send a teaser email the night before, the day before, maybe 2 or 3 days before. It really kind of depends on when their start date is. But you've interviewed this person a couple different times. You know what they're like. You're looking forward to them joining the team. Tell them that. Right? Send them that email a few days ahead of time. Hey, I know your start date isn't for another couple of days, but I just wanted to let you know I'm really excited about working with you. Bonus points here if you can mention things that came up in the interview, not just things from their background, but if you can mention things about them that really resonated with you or that offered a connection to you or what have you. And double bonus points if you can sort of preview what they're going to look forward to in connecting with other people. So as you learn about people's habits, hobbies, preferences, favorite sports teams, whatever personal information you might learn that helps them make a connection to other people on the team. If you can mention, oh, by the way, you love this rugby, you're gonna love meeting John because he also is a fan of that same team. Anything you can come up with like that, that's going to help them make that connection. Well, the reason I say start before they start, actually, I'll tell you the reason, because first, in a second, but first, let's scale how to take a teaser email to the next level, which is getting the whole team to start before they start. And it's with a technique I like to call an interview. So this is the opposite of an interview. In an interview, you're talking to lots of different people and you're hoping to sort of, you have one person, you have lots of different people you're interviewing, and you're hoping to find one person that you're going to pick to join the team. In an interview, you've picked that person, and now you're going to make sure that one person meets everybody on the team and meets them in a relatively quick fashion. Now, ideally, if we want to go back, I'm a huge fan of getting the team that someone's going to be working with involved in the interview process as much as possible. But if you're not already doing that, you can still do something like an interview. The way this works is that on that very first day, whether it's in person, whether it's as they're coming through the door, whether it's in their email inbox, or whether it's, I've worked with some teams where we do the interview by just dropping notes on that person's desk throughout the first day. But the idea is every person on the team that they're going to be working with comes by at some point in that first day and not just gives them a greeting, but tells them something they're looking forward to about that person. So if they were involved in the interview process, this works the best because then they have things they remember about that person, their strengths and weaknesses, their knowledge, skills, and abilities. They have all of those different things that they can go back on, or personal information that they might have learned, personal connections, or what in psychology we often call uncommon commonalities, things that they're now going to have in common with this new hire that are uncommon to the organization and therefore going to be that cool connection between those two different people. Now, again, this is something that you start before they start. You're going to have to start planning for this and planning for whether or not you want this to be an email thing, whether or not you want it to be an in-person thing. Obviously, it's going to vary by what type of working arrangements you have, but you want to make sure that person is sort of bombarded with those, not just generic goodwill messages, welcome to the team, it's going to be so great to work with you, but specific things that each individual notice that makes them excited about that person. Now, the teaser email, I told you I would tell you this, the teaser email and the interview, they both work because they eliminate what I often call first day of school syndrome. If you ever transferred schools, right? I did this a couple different times in my K through 12 education. You transfer schools, you're at a brand new school, you don't know anybody, and what happens? The worst is lunch on that first day. You're walking into the cafeteria, all the cliques, all the teams, they're all there together, and you don't even know where to sit. You don't even know how to navigate who's supposed to sit where. And all you want is someone to just motion to you and go, here, come sit with me, right? The idea behind both the teaser email and the interview is this is one of those great everything I needed to know about dealing with humans I learned in primary school, right? The idea behind an interview is you're being that person in that lunchroom for that human. You're saying, hey, here are the things you could have lunch if you want, but more importantly, here are the things we're going to connect with you on. Here are the things we're so excited for. So you're bringing people, you're just speeding through that awkward, I don't know anybody thing and speeding right towards that connection. And again, you start planning this before they start. Now, I'm going to tell you my favorite trick to start before they start, and it only costs $20, maybe a little more if you're a remote organization and you got to ship it. But my absolute favorite trick, in fact, I actually call it the $20 question. And this one you really have to start before they start, because if you do this right, this becomes a surprise. Now, I learned this from one of my friends I've had the privilege of knowing, working alongside and studying, a man based in Toronto named Michelle Falcon. Michelle has run a lot of the highest rated in terms of service restaurants in the Toronto area. He's now the founder of this chain of sort of quick service restaurants that are getting incredible scores, not only in employee engagement, but in quality and user reviews and profitability. They're really blowing it up because he's got this idea. Again, he's got an employee first culture that if we connect with those people, they will serve customers well. And he does this trick called the $20 question. In every single interview, once somebody's made it past that first round and they've made it to that, we know you're qualified, we just want to find that person who's the best fit, they ask every single person a simple question. What's something that costs less than $20 that you use to treat yourself? And we all have different things. It might be I buy myself a movie ticket. It might be that I get a caramel macchiato from Starbucks. It could be all sorts of different. It might be a chocolate bar. It might be an experience, whatever it is. But the idea is we all have that thing that when we're a little down or when we just sort of want a little indulgence, that it costs. We're setting the parameters. That little inexpensive thing that we do to kind of remind ourselves that we're special. And they just ask that in the get to know you section of the interview. And they document it. They document every single one of them. So when people start on their very first day, they've already gotten a teaser email from their boss. They're meeting all of their coworkers. And then in that very first day, guess what shows up on their desk or at their door if they're working remotely or what have you? It's that answer, right? If they're movie buffs, it's the 2 free tickets to go see something in the theater. If they love those caramel macchiatos, it's a Starbucks gift card, or even better, it's a DoorDash that meal at lunchtime. The idea is you start before they start by asking that question, and then you make a plan that on that first day we're welcoming by showing them, hey, this is how much we paid attention, how much we care about you, right? And I'm already seeing people that are like, man, I wish my boss would do that. I know, but I can't rewind time and make that experience like yours. What I can do is tell you, be that type of boss, right? And it only happens if you start before they start. And the next idea I want to share with you is this idea of exposing them to the culture of the organization and also the team. This is how we're going to make those connections. Now, culture comes in a couple different layers. We want to make sure if somebody feels like they're connected to people and feel like they belong, it's because they're a cultural fit on each of these different layers. When you study organizational culture and team culture, it starts with values. It starts with what are the things that we as an organization value, what are our reasons for existing. Now, this is sometimes represented in something like a core value statement, but other times you may have to get specific with them about those sort of unwritten things. Every organization has those little things they value that aren't necessarily written out there. I'm reminded of, for example, here in the United States where I am, there's a upstart airline, it was an upstart 40 years ago called Southwest. That's now a national chain, sort of a pioneer of great customer service culture, great employee experience, and what have you. But one of their values was actually low-cost airline. And that was not written at first in any statement of core values, but it was something the founder, Herb Kelleher, said every single time when you have to make a decision, just remind that. Okay, what gets us closest to being the low-cost airline? We serve customers by being the lowest cost. You're empowered to make decisions, but the thing you need to value whenever you make those decisions is that mantra. So sometimes this is making sure they're up to date on what we as an organization have said are our values. This might be you as a leader explaining to them what each of those values means. But other times it might be guiding them through and going, look, here's kind of how we as a team value each other, or here's what we value in the way we serve customers. It starts from values and it moves towards beliefs. What do we believe about the world? And what do we believe about our industry? Every company, every organization is attempting to achieve some objective, right? We all know we have a mission statement, we have a vision statement, we have a way we serve customers. But the way we achieve that objective flows out of our beliefs about the world, flows out of what we think is the right strategy for us as an organization, or flows out of the reason we picked this mission is because of these sort of beliefs. I'm a huge fan of a leader here in the United States named Sally Krawcheck. Sally started this investment firm called Ellevest. Ellevest has been one of the top for retention, for employee engagement, and for productive. They're one of the Glassdoor best places to work consistently. Ellevest is known as such a great company because they're committed to not only values, but also beliefs. They believe that in the Western world, there is a massive gender investment gap, not just a gender wage gap, but a gender investment gap. And their big belief is that by empowering women to take more control over their finances, they can close that gap. Those are beliefs, right? I mean, they have data behind those beliefs, but they're operating out of those beliefs to achieve their mission statement. So as a leader, you want to be making sure everybody on those first couple of days is not only aware of the values, but the beliefs. Why? Well, not only does this matter to make sure somebody is a fit, but it matters to make sure that they feel connected to people, because values and beliefs shape behaviors. And that's ultimately how we're going to make connections to other people. Do our behaviors, are they in sync? Are we both modeling that sort of respect? I was just on site working with a client yesterday, speaking at one of their senior leadership retreats. And I think it was one of the most amazing things I noticed that they didn't even notice because it's such an ingrained behavior, is I noticed the way everyone was still referring to each other with a title, Mr., Dr., Ms., Mix, whatever it was. It wasn't just, and it sounds weird, I know, because I come from for one thing, I'm a millennial. So like we're everybody by their first name type of people. It sounds weird, but it was a behavior that was the norm in that organization, that's how we demonstrate respect to each other. We honor each other with that title, with that formality. Seems weird to me, but I'm not a fit to work in that organization. If you are a fit, it's a great connection. And as a leader, if you want to make sure you're making connections over documentation with those new people on your team, you're going to want to make sure they're very clear. This is the culture of the organization. These are the things we value. These are the beliefs, and these are the behaviors you're going to see from your peers over the next week, 2 weeks, over the next month, and why they act that way. And these are the things that people are going to be looking to you to embody as well. Right? We've all had that person that we get hired, and within like 14 days, we realize their behaviors aren't really a fit. But did we give them a chance? Right? Do we tell them what sort of behaviors which flow from beliefs and throw from values are expected of them? That's part of making connection a priority over documentation. And the next idea, and I already sort of hinted at this, is to seek to create uncommon commonalities. Uncommon commonalities. What are those? So as I said earlier, those are the things that two individuals have in common that are uncommon to the rest of the organization and even to the rest of the team. And here's the interesting thing. We know that uncommon commonalities, finding out that we both grew up in the same part of the country. Maybe we both attended the same university. Maybe we both love the same sports team. Maybe we both love the same film franchise. We're gaga for Christopher Nolan films. Or maybe we're the opposite. We can't understand what's happening in a single one of them, right? Everybody's a little bit different on that take. We all have those. And when we find that we have something in common with each other that is uncommon to the group that's around us, we begin to feel slightly closer to that person. When we look at the research, what we know is that uncommon commonalities are the beginning of bonds and friendships on a team. But think about it. You find out that you love the same sports team as someone, or you love the same TV show as them. What do you talk about with them in your downtime? You talk about that thing you have in common, which leads to more conversations, which leads to more discoveries, more time spent with each other, eventually more bonds and more connections. Why does this matter? Well, it matters because one of the single biggest predictors of retention, of engagement, et cetera, in an organization is how well people can answer some version of the question, do you have a friend at work? Not are you friends with everyone at work? Do you have one friend? Do you have two friends? Do you have a friend at work? And you're not these people's parents. It's not your job to find them friends and amazing social experiences. But if we're going to prioritize connection over documentation, it may be part of your job to create the space where they can find those uncommon commonalities so that they have something to work with to develop those friendships. I'm going to give you 2 tools I love to help create uncommon commonalities on the team. The first, I would encourage you to do this right away as an activity with your team, even if you're not hiring in somebody. It's what I call a manual of me exercise. So when I do this, I often do this with teams where we're looking to find more uncommon commonalities. And we look to create a document, a user's manual to working with me. And this can be full of personal information if you want. I do this sometimes, and people make PowerPoints with family photos and notable life experiences, what have you. That's great. I do it other times where people answer just a simple 4-box grid with 4 questions on them. And the 4 questions are really the core of this manual of me. And here are the 4 questions. They're fill in the blank questions that everybody on the team considers and then reports out to the team on. Fill in the blank questions. Number 1, I'm at my best when blank. Number 2, I'm at my worst when blank. Now, these are not just certain knowledge, skills, or abilities. This isn't just certain tasks. This could even be certain environments. I'm at my best when I'm in this room right here, about a 10-foot by 10-foot room in the basement of my house, right? I'm at my best when I can have that quiet time dedicated to work solely in. Now, I love being around people, but I do my best work when I'm in an environment I can control and can focus in. I'm at my best when blank. I'm at my worst when I'm in distraction-laden environments like an open office. Why? I'm actually too sociable and I never get any work done because I just want to catch up with people, right? So you could talk about subjects that people are great at, or you could talk about the ways people have found they work best. So those are questions 1 and 2. Questions 3 and 4. Number 3 is, you can count on me too. In other words, these are the ways I help teams. I've helped teams in the past. These are the ways I help the team. If you need help in these areas, I got you. You can count on me to do this. And then the 4th question is, what I need from the team is. In other words, where are the areas that you need support? Where are the places where you already sort of know you might have roadblocks or derailers of your productivity that you're kind of telling people right off the bat, right? So I'm at my best when, I'm at my worst, you can count on me, what I need from you. Now, this works great to get your team connected to find those uncommon commonalities. But what I've found is that in onboarding new hires, handing them those users manuals to the members of their team is such a great way to get them connected to how to understand everybody that they're about to be working with much quicker. It's such a great way to help them find those uncommon commonalities of similar strengths or weaknesses or desires or what have you. Again, if you make it a little more personal with more personal details, you'll find them even faster. But imagine, think about that. Imagine like joining a team, and within the first day or in the first week, you've met with everybody and heard their answers to those questions, so you understand how best to collaborate with them. Wouldn't you feel far more connected and far more able to just jump right in, right? So we use this a lot of times on teams as an onboarding thing. Hey, here are the users manuals to us. And by the way, in a week or two, we're going to want those answers from you. We want you to share them out because we want to know about you as well. Now, that's a pretty laborious one. So if that takes a little bit too much time and what have you, you might want to think about just the smallest way to do it, which is to tee up a discovery question every once in a while. These are sometimes called icebreaker questions, but I think we all kind of groan, to be honest with you, when we hear the word icebreaker. We've all been a part of like some awkward team building activity with the most confusing ice. If you were stranded on a deserted island and you could only pick one thing, what would it be? And it's like a dumb question because everyone would pick an inflatable Zodiac boat with an outboard motor and a compass, like duh. Right. Right. But, so we tee up those, but a discovery question is a little bit different. It's designed to get into a story about someone. It's designed to find more information about them. So discovery questions could be things like, just as you're about to start your weekly meeting, especially with that new hire, you just throw out a question like, hey, what's everyone looking forward to this week? Or what was really exciting about the weekend? Or hey, we haven't asked this in a while. What are you most proud of over the last quarter when you look at the last quarter of your life? My favorite discovery question, I'm kind of nerdy here, I'm going to be honest. My favorite discovery question to ask people as I'm trying to get to know them is, who's your favorite superhero? I know, totally nerdy, right? But when you ask that, right, everyone either has a favorite superhero, hates superheroes, in which case there's probably a pretty cool story there, or they don't necessarily care all that much about superheroes, but they were really passionate about something else when they were a kid. And I find that if you can get that story out of them, like, for example, if you ask me, who's my favorite superhero, I'm going to tell you the right answer, which is Batman, the greatest of all superheroes, precisely because he was not super, right? He was just sort of a weird kid who was into martial arts, had a lot of money and a vendetta to save his city. No, I'm kidding. It was actually someone who had great privileges and felt a tremendous responsibility to give back to his city by cleaning up crime. I resonate with that on a personal level, that idea that you've been given this, and so these are the ways you're going to serve. As you learn that, you learn a little bit more about me as a person. Maybe we find out we have the same one, or I get to hear your story. By the way, if you're listening to this and you're like, Batman's ridiculous, but your favorite superhero is Iron Man, I got bad news for you. They're the same character. They're the exact, one's Marvel, one's DC, but they're the exact same character. The idea behind this or other discovery questions is we're just looking to get people to disclose to the level they're comfortable, a little bit more information about each other so that we can find those uncommon commonalities that help prioritize that sense of connection. Now, as we're thinking about somebody's first day and somebody's first week inside the organization, I would add this. Plan this out, but plan for what is the small win that you're going to get them. And by the way, just filling out all the paperwork or doing all the mandatory compliance trainings that they're supposed to do, that doesn't count as a small win. What I mean when I say a small win is plan a way for them to make a contribution to the team within the first day or the first couple of days. That might be sitting in a focus group. That might be sitting in a team meeting and tell them ahead of time, like, hey, I want your outside opinion here. So please feel free to ask questions when you don't understand because they help us think through. Or you could plan out a task you already know from their background or their experiences you want them to do. The idea behind the small win, planning out the small win, is not that you just want to kind of celebrate them, which is important in and of itself. It's that you want to give them a way where they feel like they're contributing right off the bat, because now they don't feel like this is a team and I'm trying to get to know them. They feel like this is a team and I'm already a part of it because I've got that small win. So plan out ahead of time what that small win is going to be. And then lastly, I want to just kind of end as we think about the ways in which you need to check in. Now, we're prioritizing connection over documentation here, which means ideally in that first day, before they started, we've already sent them that teaser email. And that first day, they've at least gotten a message, a greeting, here's why I'm excited about working to you, of each person who's on their team. Hopefully by the end of the first week, they've had a chance to have a more substantive chat with every single person on the team. But by the end of that first day, whether they're working on in person or remotely, by the end of that first day, we ought to be checking in with them at the end and going, hey, how'd the first day go? Who'd you enjoy meeting? You know, who have you not had a chance to get to know a little bit better? We're asking them questions about how they feel about the work for sure, but then we're also asking them questions to check in and make sure they got what they needed from a connection issue too. So plan on an end of day connection. I'll tell you one more trick, like the $20 question. If these are normal working hours, my favorite thing to do is especially if they're working on site, my favorite thing to do is do the check-in with someone at about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And when the check-in's over, just tell them, awesome. Hey, I'll tell you what, why don't you power down everything, head home. There's a lot of people that love you out there that want to hear how your first day at work was. It's not much. It's an hour. It's 2 hours, right? But it's that idea that you get it. There's more to work than just getting tasks done. And there's other people they want to connect with, right? So check in at end of day. Plan it a check-in at the end of a week. The most important thing to check in from here is, yeah, of course, there's documentation and compliance stuff, but if we're prioritizing connection over documentation, the most important thing at the end of 1 week is to make sure they've had a chance to have a substantive experience, whether that's a 15-minute one-on-one call, sitting in on a meeting, or working directly alongside every single person on their core team, right? Every single person that they're going to have to get to know. And that end of that first week, obviously, unless one of the people on the team has taken that whole week off or something, some reason like that. But at the end of the first week, that they've had a chance to have a substantive conversation with each person, so they've had a chance to connect with everybody. And if that hasn't happened, we want to make sure it does, and we get that corrected by the end of that first week. And then lastly, checking in at the end of the first month, and that's really going to be the beginning of your regular check-in cycle with them. But this is normal. This is going to feel like a regular check-in. But at the end of the first month, you want to check in for a couple different things. You want to check in to make sure they've made a connection to certain people. You've learned a lot about them and they've learned a lot about their peers, but there may still be uncommon commonalities that you're aware of that they haven't found yet. You want to help them be able to find that. And the biggest thing is you want to make sure that they actually feel like they're connected, that they have a sense of belonging, that they have a sense of safety and inclusion, and that they really feel like this is a team they're going to be on for a long time. I've lost track of how many hiring managers, how many entrepreneurs, how many people have told me within the first month, we know this person's not going to work out. And you may or may not be able to turn that around. But the reason for this 1 month check-in is to make sure we've done everything we can to help them build that sense of connection. Ideally, we don't want to get to the position where this person lumbers along on the team for another 2 years before it finally doesn't work. But more importantly, we want to maximize the chance that in that first month, they find that connection. You know, some people aren't going to work out. Yeah, but that's not why I said so many hiring managers said I could tell within the first month. My belief, truthfully, is that what actually happened is that at the end of that first month, they still didn't feel connected. You could see this in the data. People who are on positive team cultures where they have a sense of connection over documentation, they're 2.3 times more likely to be engaged at their work, which has a dramatic effect on their retention, has a dramatic effect on their productivity, and has a dramatic effect on their feelings of you as a leader and their overall sort of life satisfaction. It stems from flowing from that sense of connection. So we're prioritizing connection over documentation and trusting other tools and anything we can do to make the documentation part and all of that easier so that we can focus on, I mean, ultimately the reason we decided to get into any sort of leadership capacity to begin with, which is that we care about people and we care about bringing out the best in people. And the way that we do that, the way that we set them up to be on the best team ever, is to make sure they feel connected to that best team ever. So listen, I would love to, we've got some questions that are already coming in. I would love to see more of them. So as you think of them, put that in the chat. But right now, I'm going to turn it back over to the LiveHire team. They're going to talk about some amazing features with you while we get that Q&A set up and while we get some time for you to put those questions in there.
Awesome. Thank you, David. That was excellent. And while you were busy going through that, I wrote down a couple of points, which I'm going to refer to as we go. But two really important things that you said. Superheroes, number one, I'm a Wolverine fan for no other reason than he was a badass with claws. So
that does help me explain the choice of beard. I get it. I get it.
Much more superficial than your one. Then when you mentioned obviously the and obviously maybe I'm getting a bit of my geek on as well, but Batman and Iron Man, the similarities between Marvel and DC, there's always that competition. The other one is Thanos from Marvel and Darkseid from DC were obviously the two comparisons. So
yeah.
Anyway, that was my comic book, which I felt like I had to share. All right, guys. First of all, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Let me just quickly share my screen here. And I think everything that David mentioned is absolutely spot on, right? How can we prioritize connection over documentation? When I guess the one thing that we can't ignore is that from a compliance perspective, especially in certain industries, documentation is something which just needs to be done. It's a necessary evil. The issue that we find is that a lot of clients, when they think about onboarding, it's a negative, I guess it's almost like a negative conversation in terms of, oh, we've got so much documentation that we've got to get done and forms, etc., that hiring managers and HR, they spend so much time focusing on the compliance side that they just forget about the engagement side. So in terms of what Live Onboard does, our whole philosophy, and this is LiveHire as a business, our whole philosophy is to automate manual and time-consuming tasks that people hate doing to enable you to focus on the value add, which obviously is sort of what you sort of spoke about and tied up at the start. So if we think about LiveHire just very quickly before we focus on the live onboarding part of our platform, our whole philosophy, as I said, is focus on engaging and value add and streamline and automate those manual processes. And LiveHire as a platform is basically your end-to-end engagement, recruitment, all the way through to onboarding, successful hire, and even I guess sort of that management throughout, things like probation period reviews, etc. So just got to let my little dog into the room because he's scratching and howling outside. In terms of and when we think about that engagement thing, what we talk about, I guess, is, right at the very, very beginning, how do you share your EVP? How do you communicate and engage with potential candidates? So when the time comes to have a recruitment process, they're more engaged with your business. The research shows that a more engaged recruitment experience translating into a more engaged and experience-led onboarding process will then ultimately relate in better quality hires and less first-year attrition. So, Karen, I'm going to actually just quickly open up to yourself. When we speak to our clients, there's a lot of pain that we hear from an onboarding perspective. Things like wasted time, too many errors, lack of compliance, inflexible workflows, never mind, obviously, the negative experience that comes with it. So given obviously there was a question at the start, what were some of those answers that came through that we can share?
Sure. Consistency was one that came through quite a lot, ensuring consistency. A couple of other people talked about the time frame. The process is long, multiple people involved, and they've got old technology. This was a good one, getting stakeholders to understand the idea of candidate experience. Candidates not returning documents, handover to different teams, the length of the onboarding process, too many manual steps, and IT issues, people being unable to log into the system from day one or access their phones, similar to the issue David had on his first day.
Yeah. And I can relate to that. Having started a new job, you're all excited, you're a little bit nervous, you get in there and you get to your desk and all of a sudden there's no computer or there's no logins, and you spend 3/4 of that first week just trying to log into your system. And to David's point, what have you accomplished in that week? Well, not much, unfortunately. So it's very easy to all of a sudden you start having those doubts. You're already nervous about the process and about joining a new company which is unfamiliar to you, and you've had this experience. So I think that's a really valid one. I guess the good thing is that it doesn't sound like any of these businesses are alone. These are common issues that we hear when we speak to people about onboarding, and Live Onboard can definitely help and solve the majority of those issues. And when we think about onboarding, the onboarding process is more than just sending a contract to somebody and then them signing a contract and returning a signed document, and then away we go, maybe collecting payroll details. First of all, the onboarding process, and to helping to streamline and automate that process, make it easier for the people involved, it starts earlier than just sending them a contract. It's having the ability to easily prepare all your contracts, your letters of offers, any documentation that needs to go out, having those templates effectively pre-built and easily accessible for the right users. If we think about the candidate side, it's the ability for people to easily accept or review policies, make any changes or have any questions, and come back to you with any questions that they may have in relation to, that started package. And then if we think about from the business perspective, it's also ensuring that things like payroll documents are collected and entered into the system. There's nothing more frustrating than a candidate not receiving their first payslip or money into their account because documents aren't uploaded correctly. It's ensuring that those things like IT setups are all done. If you're in a business where uniforms are required, it's ensuring that uniforms in the right sizes and the right colors and the right amounts are set up and ready for that person to go on that first day. And in terms of Live Onboard, well, those are standard features that we offer, but there's a fair bit more that we do if we think about that, trying to automate and improve that process to give you time back to focus on the value add. It's things like offboarding interviews and sending up your probation reviews. Also just any general forms that you may need them to have completed. And that could be forms related to things like your IT or uniforms, or it could be candidate questionnaires or questionnaires for hiring managers to complete, to share with the with the new starter. The other thing which I noticed looking through some of those questions were systems and integration. So ensuring that your recruitment data easily goes into your onboarding data, so you're not manually entering more information. And then the onboarding information, once that's collected, can then go to the necessary either HR system or payroll system. Manual errors and manual data entry is a time-consuming, obviously, it's a time-consuming task, but it also leads to a lot of errors. And then to what David sort of said, that pre-boarding part as well. So ensuring that we can almost sort of nurture a candidate before they actually start. Often there'll be a notice period. We know that a lot of candidates will receive counter offers or potentially get cold feet. So how can you encourage and nurture the candidates, I guess, or that new employee from that point in time when they resign with their old business to day one and when they get ready to start with you? David, you mentioned a bit about a teaser email, which is something that I absolutely love. And I think that that's super important. And again, if we're thinking about the the experience and the emotions of people that are going through leaving a new job and starting a new job, those emotions will fluctuate over time, right? You're super excited when you get a new offer, you accept it. You then have to go and resign, which is a scary feature. You might then be thinking, oh, well, have I made that right decision? So having the ability to, send emails to those new starters before they begin with a bit of information. Hey, this is, your team. This is the people that you're going to be working with. Here's a bit of information about them, but also here's more general information about our business. So you can sort of drip feed information to those potential hires before they begin to make sure that they are more comfortable when day one arrives. Having a candidate portal is super important, right? So if we think about that experience, well, with LiveHire, you have a great recruitment experience. Everything is mobile optimized. It's text messaging enabled. Now, all of a sudden, you need to sign your contract. So having a portal where all your information can be stored in one location. You can complete all those forms. You can provide further information. But also as an organization, you can leave little bits of information about you. You can see in the bottom right there, we've actually got a video. What is it like to work at our, at our company? So you can start drip feeding some of that information where candidates can refer back to when they need to, if they'd like to access any of that information. The ability to obviously complete forms. Well, there again, compliance is a necessary evil. We need to obtain certain documentation. So having the ability for candidates to provide you that information in a really friendly environment with a great user experience, being able to track how they are progressing through that. Maybe get halfway through, save information. They can come back at a later date if they need to complete it, or if they don't have the time to do it. Initially, we know from a candidate behavior perspective that majority of people that are going through a recruitment process and completing things like onboarding forms are actually doing that on a mobile device. So ensuring that the ability to upload information is friendly from a user from any device is obviously paramount as well. And then from a back-end perspective, I did see one of the questions was actually tracking where are candidates in the process, what forms have they completed and returned. So having the ability for you as an organization to see where your new starter is in the process, what information are you still waiting on, to go through for them to complete, and being able to send them sort of little prompts to say, hey, David, here's a reminder, we need you to complete the uniform form again. We don't have that information yet. So just being able to track where candidates are in the process is, again, absolutely paramount. David, I love the idea of an interview form, and it's something that we believe in as well. So having the ability to capture information on a new starter before they begin, which is effectively maybe not related to their job, just information about what are they looking for. And LiveHire Live Onboard has the ability to create forms where you can enter that sort of information, and that information can then be distributed to the required team members. So in this case, what is your favorite coffee? Well, I'm a long black drinker. I love chocolate over chips. And 3 fun facts about myself. I love magic tricks. I always wanted to be a firefighter when I was growing up. I'm not too sure why. And travel has always been my big thing. And I'm lucky enough to have been able to travel to a quarter of the world at the age of 35. So fair bit more time to see the other 75%. So having the ability to share that information with the team before I start, again, will help break that ice in a way. So at least when you're going through your induction, there's things that maybe aren't related to work that we might have commonalities that we can talk to. And again, obviously, all that information will be completed and sent to the relevant stakeholders in the team. If we think about over here again, in this case, the candidate might have gone through that information. They now have completed that information. You can see that we've got a bit of information about the new hire, but also what we have set up is that when you complete your IT forms, when you complete your uniforms or whatever the forms may be, they will go to the relevant parties in the organization before the candidate starts employment. So on that day one, it's already confirmed that your IT setups and logins are ready to go. You're not just going to have there with a laptop and then wait. Your uniforms will be either at your desk, or if it's an on-site job, they might be FedEx to you. So they arrive on your doorstep 2 days before, so you're ready to go. And any other information can always be sent to the right people, as are those notifications for things like your probation reviews or your 1-month check-ins. And I think, David, you raised a really, really good point. How often do we have conversations with hiring managers about new hires and they say, yeah, I'm not so sure that this person is going to survive or is the right type of person. And more often than not, it's because, they've had such a clunky or poor onboarding experience that they're not bought in. So if we can automate that and make sure that all those processes, the ticks and boxes or the ticks and checks are completed rather, so we do have the time to focus on the experience, we can have that conversation with the new starter about how are they feeling, how are they integrating within the business, what are their concerns, and either we can, nip in the butt quickly, or if it is going to be a major concern, at least we are aware of it before and we can have a conversation whether this is something us as an organization can rectify. But at least it's not going to come to the end of the probation period and it's going to be either a difficult conversation to have or a surprise when somebody says, you know what, this isn't the role for me. So with that, I want to first of all say thank you very much, everyone, for giving us the time. And I'll hand back to you, or back to you, Karen, to see if there are any questions that have popped up, or we can use anything else, David, that you'd like to add.
Well, I'll have to confess while Karen's coming back on that while you were talking, I had to Google what a long black is, being an American.
I think you guys call it just an Americano, isn't it?
Yeah, no, essentially, yeah. Apparently, there is a difference according to the article I found. And if you're interested in that difference, maybe that's a question for offline. But for now, we'll figure out what questions we got going.
Excellent.
So yes, that's perfect time for us to transition in and invite people to ask us their questions that they have for David. Any burning questions that you'd like to run by David or Leron? He's good at answering questions too. While we wait, I've got some great news for everybody. Let me share my screen. David has organised for us, for those of you that didn't win a copy of his latest book, Best Team Ever, which is a fantastic read. That book is currently available for our viewers to download, a downloadable version on Amazon for only 99 cents. How amazing is that? So I will share the link with the Amazon link for that ebook with you shortly. I'll also send it out with the follow-up webinar recording. So here we go. We have a question. We're hiring 2,000 people per year and each manager is providing a very different experience. How do we get consistency amongst hiring managers?
Yeah, well, I mean, so I don't want to jump right in and go live onboarding, but I'll tell you a story first, and then I'll sort of set it up. So I have a great friend of mine, Tim. Tim was hired to be the HR director of a small energy company based in Calgary, Alberta. And if you know anything about the way oil went there, that very quickly became a very large company and then very quickly became a very small one again. Tim actually got sort of 30 years worth of experience in HR in about 10. And he had to do the same thing at one point, hiring thousands and thousands of people each year. Systems are the key there, right? Hiring managers providing a very different experience. My guess is because they either don't know what behaviors are expected of them because there's not a system. And when I say system, I mean as simple as a checklist, right? They either don't know what the steps we've laid out or make for optimal onboarding are, so they don't have that system in place, or they either aren't being held accountable or know they're not going to be held accountable to maintaining that system. So it kind of ends up going one of two ways. The first is you've got to create those systems. The second, you've got to enforce them. And any tool you can use, even if it's as simple as a checklist, right? Any tool you can use to help people remember what those steps are, what the order, what that looks like, that's automatically going to systematize the experience across all those different managers, just telling them what it is. But then making sure you've got a way to track whether or not the hiring managers are doing that, that's going to make it even more consistent.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that I would add with that is that systems and checks are very important, but the experience for those hiring managers to follow needs to be very easy. Very often we might see that organizations, they might use different systems or processes or checklists, but they are so complex or convoluted, or it's just not easy for the hiring managers to do it. So they kind of just wing it and go out on their own. And that's when you sort of lose, you lose your data, but also that's when obviously all your processes go out the window. So to put in place those checks and balances, it needs to be, and if you are going to use technology, it needs to be something that is easy to use. Otherwise, people will just circumvent the system.
Yeah, you don't want to be giving people the experience I had, if you remember at the top, of being sent off to go to primary training on site, then back out into the field and immediately told, well, now I'll show you how things really work. What that really is a disconnect at some point in the process, either telling people putting the system in place to teach them, enforcing them, or as you said, making it too difficult to just even follow whatever systems we put in place. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you both for that. We don't seem to have any more questions. Final call for questions before we finish up. I'd like to thank David for sharing his expertise with us today and his time while we wait for those last questions. Thank you, Liron, for telling us all about Live Onboard. And thank you to our wonderful audience for sharing your busy day with us. I think that's about it. No more questions. Thank you all. See you at our next event on the 30th of November. Bye-bye.